Little meditation. Put on some nice zazen just for a few minutes. Sit up nice and straight. And let's focus in on the heart. Just allow your attention to rest in the center of your chest. Don't fight the thoughts that come up, the feelings that come up, the sensations, the external noises. We have lots of external noises here today. So anything that appears, just allow your attention, your focus to return to the heart and let whatever is appearing arise and then fall away. But anchor your attention right in on your heart. Let's try that out. see what a difference just a few minutes of meditation makes. It's amazing. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about the collective consciousness. I'm wondering how many of you this past week felt the big wave of sad that came through. Anybody notice it? Yes? A couple people. Like out of the blue. It's just this avalanche of sad that came through, and then is followed by a little anger. She felt the anger. Go ahead, Tommy.
I had a lot of people tell me that they were sad or depressed this week. Like 3 people.
Yeah. See? You caught the tail end of the anger, because that's what happens with sad, right? If you don't process it and release it, then it like turns into the angst and the anger and the anxiety of And that all came through our collective consciousness. And it's not uncommon at the end of the year, but what I've noticed over the past 20, 30 years is this collective consciousness that we all share and experience is getting stronger. There's a higher degree of connectivity. So when these big waves of sad come through, or sometimes it's bliss and ecstasy, you guys felt those ever? Where you're just like going along about your day, and then all of a sudden it's like, woo, I'm really happy right now. And we can kind of just experience these, but it can be very confusing because our ego, the way that we maintain a semblance of control, is we claim ownership. Exactly mine. So if we get hit with this wave of sad or wave of anger or even wave of bliss, we immediately say, oh, it's me. I must be doing something. If it's bliss, we're like, oh, I'm doing something right. Yes, I meditated really well today. Or my mindfulness is spot on. If we're sad, then it's like, oh, I must be like missing something. If I'm angry, I've got to be doing something wrong, which triggers the anxiety, right? But that's all an illusion, this grasping at control, when it is just a wave that's coming through the collective consciousness. And what's very interesting about this collective consciousness is this illusion of control is not completely wrong, because we all contribute to the collective. So if we feel the anger and then we just immediately own that and indulge in it and add to the fuel to the fire, then we're adding that to the collective. So then when we're interacting with others, we're like spreading it out like sparks. And then it takes root in other people, and then it grows and grows and grows. The same with the sadness, which, if it doesn't turn into anger, it can turn into grief. And as I've told you guys 100 times these past couple of years, this COVID virus, it feeds on grief. That's the fertilizer. So I want to be very clear. Grief does not cause COVID. Emotional states do not cause illness. There's some people out there that would argue with me, but from what I see is an emotional state doesn't cause a dysfunction in the body, but what it does is it creates a fertile environment for different types of diseases to take root. I don't know them all. There's books out there you can find and explore that whole world. But the ones I know of is that COVID definitely likes to root into grief. So be really careful with grief. If you experience grief, allow yourself to process it. Let it flow through you and release it consciously. The other one that I know of is resentment. And resentment is a breeding ground for all types of cancer. Where we just, because resentment, think about what we do. When we feel resentment, we're encasing anger in a little bubble, and we're holding it in a place within our body. And that's exactly what cancer is, right? It's a cell that's malfunctioning, so then it isolates itself, and then it wants to communicate, so then it communicates with others and causes them to malfunction, and then the body keeps trying to isolate it, and then it just... That's why some cancers will spread really fast and other ones won't. But whatever the emotional state that we experience, especially when it's just a wave from the collective unconscious, we can look at it as a tremendous gift. Because if we get hit by one of these waves and then we're immersed in it and we're feeling it, that means that state, that energy is still locked up within us. And if you're, let me rephrase that. So if you're taken out by it, by a wave, because the way I said it the first time sounds like if you don't experience it all, you become what I call the stone Buddha. You're just numb to everything. But rather, if you're taken out by it, you're hit with the wave, and then all of a sudden you just can't function. Whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 days, it's the same principle, that emotional energy is still unresolved within you, and it's screaming for attention. So what that means is it's a gift, in that it's telling you with a very loud message, like, hey, this is something to look at and contemplate and allow your body and mind to release. And so we do that through the third practice that we do. We meditate, we practice mindfulness, and then we contemplate. And contemplation can take different forms. There's the contemplation we do when we read spiritual books, which I find is excellent practice for everybody, especially right before bed and first thing in the morning. So if you have a mind that likes to chew and chew and chew and chew, feed it some good chewing gum. So you pick up a spiritual book and you read a line or two or paragraph, and then you let your brain chew on that concept. What does that mean? How does that affect my mind? How does that impact my life? And you just sit there and you, throughout the day or throughout the night, as the case may be, you let yourself kind of contemplate and chew on that concept. Now, when we are given one of these gifts, sometimes it's very unpleasant, especially if it, the one that many people received this past week, of sadness, which branches off into grief or despair or anger or resentment. If that's the case, carve out a little bit of time And I do recommend setting a timer, because that's very helpful to kind of snap yourself out of it, because you don't want to sit there and indulge and just kind of wallow over and over again. That's not contemplation, that's just pure indulgence. Instead, what it means is you take that feeling, that energy, and then you maybe set your timer for 10 minutes and you say, I'm going to honestly look at what this is. What does it feel like? What is it telling me? What is it triggering within me? What kind of stories are arising as a result of that? And that's where you've got to be really careful, because it's easy to get sidetracked into the stories, and then you start the whole woulda, coulda, shoulda game. Like, oh, if only I had done this, and oh, I would have done that. If I had known this, I would have done that. I could have done this, but I was stupid, so I didn't. And that's all just BS, so don't buy into it. It's meaningless, ultimately, because we can't do anything except for act from right now. We can only utilize the resources that we have available to us in this moment. So as you're contemplating, I picture it very much as like an archaeological dig. So you're digging through layers. It's like you find the first layer and it's all fuzzy, and there's a tendency to want to go and get the big shovel, or the pickaxe and just like destroy the thing. But no, that's not contemplation. That's just covering up, right? So instead, you get out your fine tools. You get a little paintbrush that you want to swipe away, a little tiny trowel. You're going to dig around what's there, and you excavate what this feeling is all about. And you really sit there and investigate. And if you can approach it from this very kind of scientific point of view, where you're just exploring, you're not trying to find any answers, or if you get lost in the question of why, then back up a little bit and be like, wait a minute, how is this working? What is happening here? The how and the what are much more informative than the why. Because once you start to uncover those, then it's like you're seeing the inside of the machine. And then you start to really understand that, oh, I had this experience and it was unresolved, and then that triggered this story, which created this view, and then it blocked me from seeing that, and that's how I came to that view. And so it's this fascinating process. I won't lie, it's not always pleasant. Because like I said, we have the tendency to own everything. That's our default way of controlling and manipulating everything, is we claim ownership. But if you're honest and you look at it, you see that, oh, this is just a being who's having these experiences, and this is how it's unfolded. And it was never really personal, which is a little tricky to really look at, because like I said, we have this desire to own. But at the same time, everything that you've ever experienced has never been about you. But we want to think that it's about us because we're important, right? It happened to me, so of course it's about me. But no, it was just a movement of light. And it's okay if you don't understand what that means right now. What's more practical or what's more useful is to allow yourself to do this very careful, very attentive archaeological dig into how this energy is moving through you and what is making it work the way it does. What makes it move and express itself in one way, what makes it move and express itself in another way. And don't try to figure out why it's there. Why is any of this? We don't know. I don't know. I just know that it is. When you've done this successfully, you'll feel this weight kind of just release. This sigh that happens. It's just like, and that sigh that happens is you giving back all of that energy that you've like hoarded. All of that stuff that you've held on to thinking that you own it, that you have to control it. And as I said, it's good to set a timer. So when the timer goes off, you might not be done. And that's okay. You just tell yourself, all right, our session is ended right now. We'll come back to this. And then you make an appointment in your calendar. Like, okay, next contemplation session on X will be, and you put it in there, a little reminder. We all have the little reminders on our phones now, so you can be honest with yourself and pick out when's a good time that you can actually devote 100% of your attention to this excavation. And then when it's time, you go back in again. And again, you set the timer and you do another 10 minutes or so. And each time you go in will be different. You'll uncover different epiphanies. And sometimes you might not even be expecting it, but you'll have a moment in your life where you have an interaction with somebody that shows you part of what you've been excavating. And you have this choice where you're like, oh, you can suddenly see that, oh, I always reacted this way and it had that result. But now I have this, I'm seeing what's happening. So what happens if I act a different way? And you don't know what's going to happen because it's new and different, and that can be scary. But you already know what the result is if you act the other way. And it's, if it's painful, then maybe it's worth taking the risk and seeing what happens if you do something different. That's the play and the fun of self-discovery, because we constantly have these opportunities that happen. And when we do this, when we really take responsibility, so I want to define a little bit. There's a difference between taking ownership and taking responsibility. When we take ownership, in the way that I'm using the word, it's about you're trying to control and manipulate the situation. You're saying, this is my playground, this is how it's going to be, this is how I expect you to behave, and if you don't, you can just get out or I'm going to, do something. Taking responsibility, on the other hand, is acknowledging your own habits, your own patterns, and recognizing the impact that those habits and patterns have on the collective. So, for example, if you are prone to anger, and your kind of previous view is you get angry and then you own it and say, yes, I'm angry, and then you like try and control the whole playing field, and people don't respond the way that you think they should, then you slam them, like physically or energetically, and you get even angrier and just keep pushing. And then of course people push back, which, escalates your anger, and there's this whole thing that happens. Taking responsibility would be to recognize what's happening, say, oh, I'm overcome with anger right now, and admitting that to yourself and as necessary to those close around you. If you're working in the office or you have a roommate, you can say in many circumstances that, oh, I'm dealing with a lot of anger right now. So admitting it, and then consciously trying to use the antidote. And the antidote to anger is gentleness. And you can admit that and say to people, okay, I'm really angry right now. I'm going to try my best to be gentle. I might not succeed. As you walk in the room, slam, slam, slam. Like, okay, I'm going to try to be gentle. Slam. You slow down a little bit. And then that has an interesting ripple effect. Because now all of a sudden, the people that maybe responded before to your anger with more anger now see this kind of split. And they're like, yes, I see the anger, but I also see the gentleness. And then they have a choice of, oh, am I going to respond to the anger, or am I going to respond to the gentleness? It's like, okay, I'm really angry too, but I'm going to try this gentle thing because that feels a little better. Feels like we might accomplish more if we're a little more mindful of each other's space as we're feeling all edgy and sharp and pointy. And when we do this practice, it has this amazing effect, the ripple effect. And you don't always see it. That can be a little frustrating, especially if you're prone to anger. Because you're like, I'm being really gentle, but everybody's still all, angry and sharp and pointy at me. But you don't see how they are with the rest of the world. You don't see how they are with themselves. They might have taken that gentleness that you were showing them and been a little softer within their own mind. They might have been writing this like really angry email to send, and then stopped and then said, oh wait, this is a little harsh. Let me take a breath and tone it down a little bit and just get back to basics and express only what I need to express without all the added excess. And then it even ripples out to like when we're out walking or driving. You guys have all seen somebody angry walking down the street before, right? There's a certain vibe and movement. It's very, like I said, sharp and pointy, and you just like see them from like a block away, and it's like, whoa, I don't want to get in the way of that. And people are kind of, if they're aware, they kind of step and make room. That's the gentle approach. But if they're not, their anger gets triggered, and they're just like, no, this is my sidewalk. I'm gonna own this sidewalk. And then there's the clash, and that escalates and creates more anger. But if there's more people that are aware, then there's that gentle corridor that is created for that angry person to move through. And then maybe, here they have a chance to get to the ocean and absorb some of the negative ions and calm down a bit. Or just feel the crashing of the waves, and that absorbs their anger. So what I'm saying is, you can't control the world. You can try. It's very tiring. I've tried. I've not been successful. I've never met anyone who has been successful in controlling the world. People have tried. But what we can do is control the focus of our mind. And in doing so, we start to influence this world through these very subtle ripple effects out into the collective consciousness. And what I've witnessed over these past, 30 years of teaching meditation, people are becoming more and more aware. They're more conscious of their impact on not only their own well-being, but on the well-being of each other and the well-being of the planet. There's a higher level of connectivity that's happening, that has been happening, and I think it will continue to happen and get even more intense. And I think that's why when we come into each solstice or each equinox, the energy has gotten more and more intense. The waves have gotten bigger. Like this past week, every Christmas and New Year's, there's always been a sense of sadness that passes through the world, because there's loved ones that we don't get to spend time with on Christmas. Then there's all the end of the year looking back and seeing all the projects that we didn't do. There's the New Year's resolutions coming up, and then you look and you realize, well, I've made the same resolution for the past 5 years and it hasn't happened yet. Why bother? So that, and then the stress of like, it's the end of the year, we've got to get all our budget stuff done. The accounting world that you know very well. So we feel all that, and that has been, ever since we've had a calendar, that's happened. But every year it seems it's gotten more and more intense. And I think it's because this collective conscious is coming online more and more. More and more people are becoming aware that it's not just about them. And ultimately, that's a very happy thing. It's a very good thing. But just like when you first started waking up, there was some growing pains, there was some grumpiness. It's like, no, I want to sleep some more. Stop poking me awake. And maybe some arm flailing. Leave me alone. But overall, it's a good thing. So try to encourage that and take responsibility for the level of awareness that you have. Because your actions, your thoughts, the energy that you express through your being impacts the collective. It really does. That doesn't mean that you can control it. It's bigger than you. But you have an impact. And you can help usher in beautiful times. So let's